Hello, everybody. Welcome to the HP and Intel Best in Business webcast. Really appreciate you all being here and taking time out of your day to join us. I'm Mitch Flickinger, sales engineer with D&H Distributing. For those of you who have never done any contact with me, I work on the data center and storage side of things for our technical solutions team. And I am joined here today with the HP Intel Channel Alliances Specialist, JR Page, who's going to take you through a presentation, which is going to highlight and show a lot of the features and new things about the HP AI PC with Intel Core Ultra processors. Sorry, that was a little bit of a mouthful there, but anyway, lots of cool stuff, lots of details. So again, thank you so much for being here. Do urge you to attend live for the whole thing. You'll be entered for a chance to win a solo stove or pizza oven, and you have 3 chances to win. So be rewarded for your time. And again, really appreciate you being here. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let JR take it from here. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Mitch. I appreciate it, and thanks D&H for putting this on. This is one of my favorite events you guys do. These webinars, I think they're great value, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to be able to present on this. So thank you so much. I do appreciate that. And for those who are attending, thank you for being here. I know there's a lot of things you have that take your time. And I know it takes some effort on your guys' part to set aside some time and to be here for this. So hopefully this is something you find beneficial. And so with that, if you do have questions, please always feel free to interrupt me, ask them as they come. I do see one already that's come in from Samuel about what the embargo says on my slide. You'll see this a couple times on there, embargo until February 27th. Just want to answer that really quick. For me, what that means is that I'm using an old template, and that's just kind of embedded in that. So that was a template I used at the start of the year. So that should answer that. You're going to see that a couple more times because I do like this template, but all the information is updated and new. That's just on that template. So that will answer that first question and get things going. And again, really excited to be here. Excited to share this information with you. I think this is really an exciting time in the channel for everybody. I think that as we're seeing the kind of advent of the new AI PC, we're going to talk a lot about that today. We're going to talk about how that fits into our day-to-day life. We're going to see, because that's something that we're really trying to figure out is how we're going to put that together and how we're going to make that work for us. So again, thank you for joining. And if you do have any questions, just let me know. All right, the first thing that I want to talk to, and you've probably heard this repeated over and over, especially on the HP side of things, is we've really been referring to 2024 as the year of the refresh, right? You hear this a lot. Everybody's kind of always looking for the new next great thing in that quarter. And when we say the year of the refresh, we really were specifically designed to talk about second half. There's a couple things that are in play there that make it, the year of the refresh. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of those things. The first off is coming out of COVID. We're about 4.5 years removed from COVID and that whole pandemic that we had. And what happened during that time is everybody was kind of forced to become remote, whether they wanted to, whether they were prepared for it or not. Everybody had to do that. So everybody kind of went out and bought whatever they could get their hands on. Now, IDC kind of watched this very closely. They wanted to see if during this time, if there was some change to customers' buying habits. And so what they noticed coming out of COVID is that the people started to extend the life cycle of their PCs as long as they could, try to draw that out. Prior to the pandemic, we were seeing probably the average refresh rate on our life cycles for machines was about 3 years. Right now, we're looking at about 4.5 years. And again, that's why we talk about this being the year of the refreshes, because we're right at that 4.5 year time frame. So there's a lot of people who are going to be needing to upgrade those machines. Now, next, I think this is something that's very, very important to remember. And if, I think this is one of those things that we'll talk about. And it's not necessarily have to do with Intel, but Windows 10 is coming into life here in October 2025. That's what roughly, I guess it's 15 months away, 14 months away, something like that. Anyway, with that time frame coming up, I think it's really important that we look at where we're at and if we're still running Windows 10, because there's going to be some drastic changes to Windows 11. And if we stay on Windows 10, there's going to be some charges for us, and that's going to kind of mess with our ROI. So we want to make sure that we're aware of that. And right now, when we look at, think of October of 2025, we think that that's kind of a ways away. But really, that time frame is going to come up on us really quick. And so if there's one thing I want to emphasize, if you're still running Windows 10 on your environment, make sure that you have a plan in place. Because I know what's going to happen. I've seen this happen before, is that we're going to get right up against that, and everybody's going to say, okay, we need to get something that's Windows 11, and they're going to turn around and try to buy whatever they can get their hands on. And we almost have a situation like we did back in the pandemic, where everybody's trying to buy whatever's out there, and stock's going to be always an issue. And so we want to make sure that we're prepared for that date. So, and again, it's not, even though it is, 15 months away or so, it's not too early to start thinking about that and preparing for that transition away from Windows 10. In addition to that, I was talking to one of my Windows colleagues not too long ago, and they're telling me that a third of all the machines that are out there in the market today are not capable of running Windows 11. So again, if you're not sure, make sure you go in there and look at that. Make sure your machines that you have, if you're planning on kind of riding that out, make sure that you're aware if your machines can run Windows 11. Because again, I would hate for everybody to get up to that end of port date from Windows 10 and then realize, oh, our machines don't work. So again, make sure that we have that plan in place. Now, in addition to those two things, I think it's really important to do is to talk about the importance of AI. We've seen a lot of the refresh has been driven by AI, right? I think that's kind of the new hot topic word that we see in the industry is AI. Now, I think most of us have probably realized that AI has been around for a little while. It's not brand new, but the AI PC is something that's new. And there's some things that we've seen on the processors and the way we take care of data that's a little bit different. And so we're going to talk about those and talk about how our processors have changed and how the architecture of our chips have changed, because that's very important, and to make sure that we understand that. All right, now this is a slide I like to share with people to kind of show them where we're at in this transition to an AI PC. As you can see, we started out the first of the year. This is everybody. AI kind of was introduced at the first of the year. Now you kind of see where we're at. We're kind of in that early adoption stage, but we're kind of really transitioning to that early majority stage. So what that means is, with this birth of the new AI PC, we're seeing a lot more of company CEOs investing in AI. I think that the latest stat I heard was that 58%, of CEOs of public companies are now investing in AI. That's up drastically, I'll read what it was in previous years, because we didn't have it out there. So I think everybody sees really the importance of it. 79% of all CEOs realize that it's really important that we get on top of this AI, because it's something that can really benefit our employees and make sure that they're more productive when they work and do those things. So I think that's something that's very important, is that we see kind of where we're at in that, because we don't want to get left behind. One of the things that I've seen a lot from a lot of different companies is I go out, I do a lot of different presentations. I go out and visit with customers all the time. The one thing that I'm seeing is, this paralysis by analysis. A lot of times people will kind of stand back and look at everything, and they'll be like, hey, I don't know if I can jump in yet. I want to wait until the next great thing comes out. If you do that, you're going to always be a little bit behind it. So I think it's important that we get, hey, no, that we got to jump off at some point, because this AI, it is a journey. It's not something that we're going to buy a piece of hardware and we're set for good. This is something that's going to continue to evolve. And so we can't continue to wait for the latest and greatest, because there's always going to be something that's later, it's greater and better and bigger and all that stuff. We've got to make sure that we jump in with both feet at some point. And I think it now is better time than ever. Now, the one thing that when I talk to people is, and this is the hard thing I think about AI is such a large subject. There's so many things that we can talk about with AI, and there's so many different avenues that we can look. Excuse me. And so I think one of the things that we need to do is make sure that when we look at our AI plan, that we look at things kind of from a smaller chunks version. And so what I have here is kind of where to start. This is when you're thinking about an AI plan and what to come up with. I think it's really important that we start really with the basics. And what I mean by that is, let's start talking about AI. Let's start focusing on things that matter most. Those things that we do every day, those day-to-day tasks. I put some of those things over there, stuff like summarizing document, automate meetings, research on the web. These are all things that we're doing all the time right now. And so let's just find ways that we can make that better by using AI. A couple examples here. And these are things that I use all the time. You talk about summarizing documents, and this is a big one for me. I the other day was looking at a document. It was over a 40-page document that I had to kind of review for a meeting that I was about to go into and didn't have time to go through it all, I was able to get a summary of what that document was in a matter of seconds to be able to go in and talk about that. So I think that was something that's very important to be able to kind of save me a lot of time. In addition to that, and this is another one that's really big for me, is to automate meetings. I travel quite a bit with my job. And what that means is I miss a lot of meetings. With this automate meetings tab, I can go in there and kind of get a summary of the meeting I may have missed, and to see if I have any tasks that have been assigned to me, something that's very, very important. Again, another way I can be more productive. And especially when I'm on the road, those things are really vital. I've come in from a long day working out in the community and working with partners, and then I'm able to sit down and to get a summary of a meeting right away is something that's very important. So these are ways to start when we think about AI. A lot of times we hear about all the great and wonderful things that it can do, the big, huge projects that are out there. And I think it's a little intimidating. When we start with kind of the smaller things like these, I think it makes it a little bit easier to embrace AI. All right, the next thing is kind of take those tasks that we do that are really important to our job and make sure that we're able to make them better and faster. Things like creating PowerPoints, building formulas in Excel, finding trends in data. Those last two are very, very important to me. I do a lot of reports in my job, and to be honest, I'm not a whiz at Excel, and so I always try to remember, hey, what is that formula? And AI has helped me greatly with being able to kind of come up with those quicker, not have to go out the web and search for it and check my notes and all that kind of stuff. It makes it a lot easier. The other thing I think has been really great for me is be able to find trends in data, really be able to do some research in there and find out what we're seeing behind the numbers and make them really pop for us. I think that's something that's very important when we're kind of trying to find trends and where we want to invest our money and things like that. It's been a great task and a great way to use AI. And then last but not least this is where we talk about those things that we previously thought were impossible. Real-time translations, generation of images, instant access to data. These are all things that before we thought were kind of, up in the sky a little bit. I've seen a phenomenal presentation from a vendor on AI that was taking two people who spoke two different languages. They were able to simultaneously talk to one another, and the translation was able to happen instantly. There was no waiting for to someone to show, hey, Google Translate, or pull up what they pulled up. It was done instantaneously, and that was something that was very impressive to me. I've seen presentations about how we've used AI with diagnosing medical conditions and things of that nature. All these type of things are very, very awesome to be able to see, because we kind of see where it's going. But again, I think sometimes when we look at those big things and we say, well, how do we do that? We really need to make sure that we focus on those smaller items first. All right, and today there's really going to be a change in the way we look at AI. If you look at it today, the majority of all of our AI applications are done in the cloud. Now, by doing them in the cloud, that leads to some issues, right? One, it's very expensive. The other thing is it's slow. It's sometimes hard to access the cloud if we don't have accessibility to the cloud. We're not able to run cloud applications, and so there's a lot of things that need to change from there. And so and then not to mention the other one, and this is a big one, is security, right? The cloud's not always secure, and so I think it's something that we need to make sure that get changes. And so the one thing that we're seeing as we kind of transition in this AI journey is we're seeing a lot of these applications move locally onto our machine. And one thing that kind of prevents that is the hardware that we're running, right? I think that's something that we have to make sure is up to date, so that we can make sure that we can start to run some of these applications in these AI applications locally, is to make sure our hardware can handle it, because we are going to get better control over the data that we have on there. We have seen some security breaches using AI in the cloud, and so I think there's some things like that concern us and that make us need to be able to take a step back and make sure we're prepared to run out with AI. But what we're seeing is that whole industry is changing to make it move, and I don't think it's ever going to fully change, either to be all in the cloud or all locally. I think there's always going to be a combination of those two. But we need to make sure that our hardware matches, that and is able to handle those AI applications locally. And so this kind of leads to the next part of the presentation is talking about the new Intel Core Ultra processor. This processor represents the biggest architectural update in 40 years for Intel. And that's really saying something. We've seen a lot of changes over the years. I've been doing this job for, I've been in the industry for 25 plus years, but I've also been in this role for 4 years, and I've seen a lot of changes from Intel just in those times. And so when they came out and said that this new old Core Ultra processor represents the biggest architectural change in 40 years, that's really saying something. And I think that there's a lot of reasons behind it, but one is because they see the whole industry switching over to this AI future. And I think that it's important that we have hardware that's going to be able to match that future so that we can get all those things that we see, all those awesome, cool applications that are out there, that we can make ourselves more efficient, and that we can start doing things that we only dreamed about before. We need to make sure that our hardware is going to be able to match that, allow us to do that without holding us back. So with that architectural change, there's a big difference that we've seen in the way our CPU is designed. Before, this is kind of a diagram of the CPU. We've always heard about the GPU and the CPU, right? That was kind of the traditional output units that the processing units that we've been using on a CPU in the past. But under this new processor, this Meteor Lake processor that we recently released, we've introduced ourselves to the NPU, or the neural processing unit. This neural processing unit, what it does is it allows us to be able to take those AI tasks that we have, those AI applications, and make sure it handles all of those. Now, that does a couple of things really, really well, and really helps our CPU out, because it takes a lot of the tasks that have been now handled by the GPU and the CPU and allows the NPU to do it. So that frees up the GPU and the CPU to do other things, making our machines more efficient and run a lot smoother. The other thing, and this is kind of under the radar type of thing, but I think it's something that's very important. It also allows us to run our temperatures a lot cooler on our CPU. And for those of you who know and are in the IT industry, when you have a machine that runs hot, it really breaks down the components of not only the CPU, but of all the components around that piece of equipment. And so what that does is that hurts the longevity of your machine. And so being able to, with the NPU, the introduction of the NPU allows us to keep that temperature cooler. It's going to allow us to be able to, hopefully extend the life cycle of all of our components in our computer. So that's something that's very good. In addition to that, it also takes care of the power and keeps our power down on it, which allows us to have better battery life, which is something I think that we're all excited about. I think whenever we talk to anybody, especially about on the mobile side of things, on the notebooks, is we really want to make sure battery life is the highest it can get. And this is the way of doing it, is able to free up that power and make sure that we get the most battery life that we possibly can. Now, this is a slide that we'll see a lot anytime we introduce a new processor. And I'll be honest with you, I think this is important. It's important to see some of the improvements that we've seen from generation to generation. And you'll see that first one there's actually versus a 3-year-old machine. This is something that's very, very important to be able to look at and see that. But it's not a game changer, right? Everybody has those different benchmarks. And I think it's something to be aware of, but it's not something that's really going to be changing your mind out there on a lot of things, but just is something that you need to be aware of. So when you look at versus a 3-year-old PC, you're going to see a 47% increase over office productivity. Something that's very, very important, right? We want to make sure that happens. In addition to that, we're going to see, and we kind of talked about this already, but we're going to see a 36% power reduction when we're doing video conferencing. The one thing I will say about Intel and in their benchmarks that they choose to look at, they're one that they think they're relevant to the community that they serve, the IT community, right? They want to see things like office applications. They want to see things like generation over generation, video conferencing, video editing. Those are the things that they really concentrate when they look at their benchmark scores, because those are the things that we believe that's what our customers are using the most of. And so we want to make sure that it's relevant to them. And so you can see some of those stats up there. Again, these aren't game changers, but are things that really you should be aware of and know what you're getting when you're getting a new Meteor Lake processor. Now, I think this is one of the most important slides that you'll see. And the reason is I think as we talk about AI and the transition to an AI, is it's a journey, right? And I think it's very, very important that when we look at AI altogether, is we think that everybody's coming up with different applications all the time. Intel has great relationships in the channel. And they've really utilized those relationships when they developed this Meteor Lake processor that we're talking about right now. What they've done is they've given, allowed these guys, Adobe and CrowdStrike and WebEx and Zoom and Microsoft to come in and to be able to play around with that processor to make sure that their applications that they're developing from an AI standpoint would work seamlessly on their processor. Because nothing would be more frustrating than to sit there and say, hey, we're going to go out and get a new machine, but then we have to, make sure it works with our different applications. We've already done that for you, right? Intel's made sure that working with these guys, that their applications are going to work seamlessly with their processors. So when you get a new processor, you open up a new machine, you're able to see those differences right away. And so I think that's something that's very, very important because it's, this is a thing that's changing all the time. And so those relationships matter. The other thing I think that's very important is because a lot of our competitors will come out there and say, yeah, well, we'll work with these guys too. But I think it's when they got into the game, right? And I think that's really important because when Intel started developing this processor, this Meteor Lake processor, they allowed our vendors to have access to that early on in the development. So they're able to use those, not later in the game, not after it's already been released. This was something that they gave to them early on so they could make sure their applications work right away. So that's something that's very, very important. And I think that when you think of this, is something that to take into consideration when you're thinking about who to partner up with this AI journey that we're on. Now, the other thing is I want to make sure that, and this is the one that I probably get the most questions on, is where do we see AI? How are people utilizing it in their different segments? And I think that this slide, while it's kind of a wordy slide and there's a lot of stuff on it, and it's not always fun to look at, but if you're in one of these segments, kind of see where we're at, see kind of what people in your neck of the woods are doing with AI, because this is something that's very important. You want to make sure that you're staying up with your competitors and staying up with those people that you're working that same segment. The one thing that we have seen on this, and really as I talk to different people, that the ones that we see that are kind of a little bit out in front of the game right now, finance, retail, and manufacturing. I think those are the three segments when I talk to different companies out there that seem to kind of be further along in their AI journey than the rest of us. And I think they're using it. You can kind of see some of the things that they're using it in. The one thing I've seen on finance, I've seen some great stuff, depicting fraud, how they're able to now detect fraud a little bit better, how they're able to research some of the greatest stocks on there. I've seen some demonstrations on those, which are just outstanding. And like I say, I think they're already embracing that AI journey. They're already in the middle of it. And then from a retail standpoint, what we're seeing is we're seeing a security side. Everybody's looking at that, making sure that they're secure, because that's something that's always important. And then how they manage their supply chain. I think when we talk to the retail companies, one of the most difficult things they do is be able to manage that supply chain and make sure that that's how they make money, and making sure they don't have aged inventory. And so we're seeing a lot of retail companies use AI in that aspect. And then on the manufacturing side, and this is actually, I think, where I've seen some of the really cool stuff on there, and we've seen it in some of the predictive maintenance that I've seen, being able to identify whether it's in a car part or whether it's something else when even a computer, when something's going to fail before it, identifying it's going to fail before it does. So you can be on top of that, you can prepare for that, you can start making the necessary adjustments. That's something that's been a lot of AI has been spent on doing that, and you're going to see a lot of stuff surrounding that predictive maintenance, all over the place. Like we say, we see it a lot on the computer side of things. We're going to see it a lot everywhere, because I think that's something that's important to everybody. Nothing's worse than when we're down. We've got to be able to identify those right away and fix that. So that's something we've seen quite a bit. All right. Now, next thing I want to talk about is I want to just kind of flash up this as our portfolio. I think it's really important that we kind of see where you're going to find this MPU. And as we start this journey, this AI journey, you can kind of look at some of our series out there. Probably most of you are pretty familiar with this. You've been around long enough. You've seen these different series that we're using. There are a couple things I do want to point out on our new series. One is you'll see this little logo down here. It's actually a brain. Anytime you see that logo present on a document, you're going to know that that's where you're going to find an NPU, right? So that's something that's important, because if you after this and you say, hey, I need to make sure that as we refresh our machines that we get an NPU in there, that we need to make sure that it has it. This is a way to do it, is find that little brain logo right there, and that will tell you you're going to be able to find it in the 400 series, you're going to find it in the 600 series, 800 series, and the 1000 series. That's where you're going to be able to find that. So just always keep a lookout when you're looking at that for that little brain logo, and that will tell you where you can find that. In addition to that, we've seen some great updates to our overall models of our machines. And one thing that I'm really excited about, and I want to give a kind of a shout out to the Poly Group. They're not on this call or not, but I'm sure you guys have heard of it. You know, HP bought Poly a couple of years ago. Just a phenomenal product. And I was really excited when they bought Poly because I think it's something that we could really use. And I think that we started seeing them now integrate Poly into our new G11 products. And so you're going to see, you know, Poly speakers. It's going to identify it actually on the machine. You're going to be able to see that. Some of our machines actually giving you dual microphones up there. So when you're on a call and you have to worry about moving around, it's going to pick up your voice no matter where you're at. So I think that's something that's really exciting to see us integrate Poly, because I think it's going to be a really differentiator for us, especially from our competition. When you see the quality that Poly does, it's an outstanding product. And so again, I wanted to give a quick shout out to those guys and thank them for that. But again, this is something you've probably already seen. I don't want to spend too much time on that. And I do want to flash up, the next thing I want to flash up is our workstation portfolio. The reason I want to flash that up is I think this is one of those things in the workstation side of things, we've seen AI adapted right away. We've seen a lot of adaptation into the imaging and things like that, which we so often will see our workstation products. And so make sure you're aware of that. Again, you're going to see this little logo, this little brain logo up here to identify where you're going to be able to find an NPU when you're looking to take care of that. All right, now this is something I think that we can't lose sight of. And I think when we talk about all these products and we talk about Intel, one of the things that I think that Intel does a really good job of is keeping their eye on the ball when they look at the entire complete solution. I think what happens is our competitors will some of the time will look at things and they'll say, hey, you know, we have maybe better battery life over here. And they may take one little thing out of our portfolio and say, that's what we're going to attack at. But what we look at from an Intel standpoint is we look at the entire solution, right? So we're going to give you the best overall performance. We're going to give you, but we understand that security is important. We can't give you, you know, if we gave you great performance and the security wasn't there, what good does it do you? And so I think it's really, really important that you know that with Intel, you're getting the complete package. You're getting great battery life. You're getting great production, and then you're going to get the most secure machine in the entire industry. And so that's something that's very, very important. And when you have people who talk to you about security and that message, especially from an Intel standpoint, it all begins with vPro. And I think this is something that you probably have all heard about before, vPro, and you know, it's something that's been around for quite a while now, but it's something that's evolved just like the PC has evolved. AI, this vPro platform has evolved as well, making sure that we give you the, you know, it's based on these 4 pillars of productivity, security, manageability, and stability. I'm going to tell you a quick little story that just happened recently to us. You're probably all aware of the solution, the issue with CrowdStrike, right? The whole Microsoft and the kind of messed up the travel world for a while. I was stuck out in it last week, ran into some issues with that. Because of the update that CrowdStrike offered out, it kind of did some stuff with the flying community that really caused some problems. What happened is, and we're working on putting a white paper together, so you guys are going to hear this first before anybody else. I can't use the company's name because we haven't gone through all the legal side of it yet. But there was a company out there, airline that was out there that was able to recover in less than 3 hours of being down. When this hit, it affected everybody. And this company was able to turn around and get back up in less than 3 hours. And that's because they had vPro and the manageability piece on vPro. And so that's something that when I seen that, it was very, very important. I think this company only had, I think it was in the 60s, you know, 60 flights that were affected. And I know if you guys have been paying attention to the news, there was a lot of companies, you know, out there, flying companies out there that had a lot more than that. And I was part of one of them last week. Again, I won't mention the name of the company, but I was stuck in an airport for a lot longer than I wanted to be because of that. But there was one company out there that used vPro, and they were able to go in and do that update and do that patch within a matter of hours. And that was able to save them money and save pain points for their customers as they were able to get back and get their flights going. So that was something that's very important. You're going to see that coming out in the near future. Because again, I want to emphasize when we talk about AI, and I think that sometimes we get singularly focused on just talking about AI and what it has to offer and things like that. And we forget about the security piece. We can never take our eyes off the security piece because it's something that's so important and so valuable. And Intel and vPro, and then you add on top of that Wolf Security. It's really something that sets the Intel solution apart from everybody else, is being able to offer vPro on top of Wolf Security. You know, there was a time, I think, when we were able to go in and say, hey, it's all right to throw in an antivirus in there and we're going to be taken care of. You know, those days are long gone. You need to be protected below and above the OS. vPro and HP's Wolf Security does a great job of doing that and making sure that your machines are going to be secure. Now, just want to share some stats with you here. Again, we want to make sure that you're aware of this because I think security is such a big piece of this puzzle here that we're talking about, especially when we're in this new kind of changing environment of AI, is we want to make sure that our machines are taken care of. Now, that first one really jumps out at me as we're seeing that there's a reduction versus a 4-year-old machine. And, you know, if you relate that to what we talked about earlier, where people are trying to extend the lives of their machine as long as they possibly can, you know, it went from 3 years, now we're seeing 4.5 years. We're able, if you're running a Meteor Lake processor today, you're going to see a 70% reduction in attack surfaces. So that is what that does, is takes away your the guys out there, the servers they have to attack us and to go after us as far as from a security standpoint. So that's something that's very, very important. So if you have someone, if you're thinking about, you know, trying to get 4 years, 4.5 years, maybe even 5 years out of a device, this is the slide that I want to make sure that you look at and that you take into consideration, because I think this is very, very important that we take into account all the different things that we see out there. The other thing that I think is really important is when running the latest hardware with Meteor Lake processor and vPro, we're going to see 21% fewer impactful security events. Now, what that means is right now, the average data breach globally is going to cost us around $4.45 million. And so that's up about 15% from what it was back in 2020. And so I think that's something that we need to take into consideration when we think, hey, I think, you know, we don't maybe have the budget right now to upgrade our machines. We're just going to extend the life of this machine a little bit. Be aware of that number. And it changes for industry. I think in the healthcare industry, that number is a lot higher. We're looking at close to $11 million for the average cost of a data breach. In the finance department, we're looking at about $6 million. So we're seeing that really take play nowadays, is making sure that we understand what that means as far as numbers go. I think that's something that's important to do. The other thing I think is really important when we look at that is, when you look at a data breach, one of the things that really affected is how long that data breach lasts. And I think, you know, they look at data breaches right now, they're averaging around 200 days. And if you can just cut that and shorten that life cycle of that data breach down, you're really going to reduce the dollar number that you're affected by. And so that's something that's really important to do. And so when you think of all these things together, that's where really Intel and HP have such a great story together. Again, we mentioned it earlier, but you have to now be protected, not only above the OS, which I think everybody's aware of, we all talk about that, but below the OS, is being able to identify threats before they happen. And then in the case of the airlines, if we're able to identify, you know, an issue and then have the manageability piece that's built in that we get in vPro and go over and fix that and correct that before it happens, that's a game changer. Right. And that's where we separate ourselves from our competition. And I think that's what we're all here to do, is to do that. I actually talked to, the airline that I'm not going to mention their name, but was affected by it greatly last week. I was sitting by one of their pilots on one of the flights I was on last week, and the pilot was telling me, you know, about the whole issue and what one of the causes of it was. He was telling me that one of the issues that they faced is that a member of their IT department had to go out to each terminal at the airport and each gate and manually update each of those machines. And that's what really slowed the whole thing down, is being able to get it up across the thing. And so when I heard that, I thought, oh my goodness, that's, you know, and I think of this airline's a pretty big airline. And to think that they had to do that, you know, manually at every single gate, to make sure that they got this new patch that was released out there in order to fix the situation. That cost them a lot of money. It cost them a lot of in publicity. Think of all the publicity got out there on them and how struggling that was for them and what it did to their customers. They're obviously a frustrated customer bunch is they're out there waiting to get on their flights and they can't because it's down. These are the things that are very important to consider when we think about where we're going to go with. And again, if you have that manageability piece that we talked about earlier, that's where you're going to find just how important that is when something happens. And that's what Intel really does a good job at, is making sure that they're covered from a manageability piece as far as, as well as from the security standpoint. And just on that, a couple things before I close up here is I want to make sure too, from a manageability piece, that we understand what that means. vPro offers some manageability piece of the puzzle. They're able to allow them to push out patches even when the machine's not on. And this is something that I think relates really well to me because I do this all the time. And I'm not sure if anybody out there is guilty of this as well. But sometimes you'll go out there, you'll get a patch that comes up on your machine and says, hey, you need to restart your machine to download this patch. And you're busy, right? It always comes at the worst time. And so you put it off, you defer it. That's me, right? That's what I do all the time. With vPro, what you're able to do is the IT is now able to go in, manually restart that machine, let's say at 3 o'clock in the morning when nobody's working, and then be able to force load that patch onto their machine, and to make sure they have this state of mind that it's taken care of now. They don't have to worry about that because that patch has been downloaded and they know it's been taken care of. They don't have to worry about guys like me that are out there that are deferring those patches all the time because they can go do it manually. That's something that's very important. They're also able to go in and start, if the OS is damaged, they can do an OS rebuild without having to be in front of the machine. Another part of the manageability piece that's able to get us up and running if something is to happen to us. So again, I think in today's day and age, it's important that we understand the risk that we're taking from a security standpoint, especially if we're trying to get a longer life cycle out of our, longer life out of our machines, because I think it really puts us at risk, and we need to make sure that we have those things taken care of, and we understand what those tools are at our fingertips to make sure if something does happen that we're able to take care of them quickly.
Hey, JR.
Yes.
Oh, you were actually just wrapping up there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I say we had some.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna open it up some questions. I do see some that have popped up into the chat, the Q&As. I haven't been able to look at those as I presented, but let's go through some of those right now. And if anybody else has a question that we don't answer, feel free to speak up during this time. So, any questions are out there?
Yep. Let's go with Craig Milburn here asked, is there a way to dissect best options according to end user role in the company to help find the best fit?
Absolutely. And I think the number one way to do that is to be able to see kind of what applications they're using. And I think it's to start at that route and to see, what they want to get out of that employee segment is to see, hey, what do we want them to do? What are some of the tasks that they're doing? Kind of break it out that way. And then we can kind of identify which ones we need to put in place for them or which applications they need to use that way.
Awesome. Another one here, it's a good question. How do the capabilities of these machines compare to M3 MacBook Air, M3 MacBook Pro?
That's a great question, actually. And really, from a performance standpoint, you're going to see they're very similar. I've seen the benchmarks of both. I think ours, and again, it depends. Take all benchmarks with a grain of salt, as I think some of them always try to show you, but they're very comparable from a benchmarking standpoint, from processing what they do that way. Where the big differentiator is between Intel and Apple is really in that security message. And I think that's the part of Intel they're very, very proud of, is that they have the most secure CPU out there. And in addition to that, how they work well with others. And I think that all of us who've played around with Apple before know that they're sometimes difficult to put on an environment because they don't always play well with others. Their stuff doesn't always match up well. And so I think that's where really Intel separates themselves from Apple.
Awesome. Thank you. Another great question here, circling back to vPro. Christopher asked, can you differentiate vPro security you talked about versus vPro remote management?
Yeah, so when I talk about vPro security, and this is a really good question because I do think vPro is a pretty complicated piece. And I'm going to scroll back to one of my slides here as I talk about this because I think it's important to see. So when we look at this, vPro has 4 pillars, right? And I think that those 4 pillars you'll see present here are the productivity side, security, manageability, and the stability, right? And so manageability and security are their own separate pillar there. So you're going to get the security pieces on that as part of vPro, as well as the manageability piece. They're all there. Some of them are available right out of the box as soon as you turn on your machine and upload vPro. Some of them you have to go into the BIOS and turn on. So it just depends on which features you want. But those security features and the manageability pieces are available to everybody who has a vPro machine. And I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, jump in here.
Yeah, Christopher, feel free to circle back if you need any additional information on that question. I noticed you had another one here, which is great. But we had a question here from Paul Collin that came in. Are these chips machines geared more towards business users, or would they be overkill for college students?
No, so I have a daughter. I have 2 daughters actually going to college right now. Both of them are using these machines. That probably has a lot to do with my job as much as anything else. They are designed for business, though. I think, and that's the one thing that Intel, I think, has always taken pride in, is the fact that their machines are business machines. Again, you can use them in a college setting. My daughters do. They have no problems with them, and they seem to work out fine.
Excellent. Yeah. And one important thing to keep in mind is that power consumption is coming down, along with fan noise. And, at least from my experience, those are the 2 biggest complaints everyone in the world seems to have about laptops. So the better we address that, the better off everyone will be. And these make perfect systems for just about anybody. And
by the way, I was part of that group that was complaining about the fan noises and things like that. I've ran some older machines and I've seen that and I've heard it firsthand. And I think that the changes that we've seen in the G11 and with the Meteor Lake processors have really addressed that, because that was something that I noticed when I would be out and about, showing off some of those older machines, and that's something that has been addressed.
Awesome. Can you also talk briefly about the use case scenarios of H versus U ultra SKUs?
Yes. So there's kind of been a transition. We're seeing, the ultra SKUs usually that U SKU that you'll see. And I'm actually trying to see if I have it. I may have it in one of the backup slides here that kind of shows there is a transition. It doesn't look like I have it on this one. We're transitioning to some of those. The U SKUs you're usually going to find in our higher end machines, your workstation machines, that way, where the H is kind of been more transitioned into our 800 series or 1000 series machines, where you're going to find that H processor.
Awesome. We had another partner ask, do you have a battle card highlighting HP's advantages versus the competition? I believe that's probably in some of the assets that were sent over that I think will be up on dndh.com/HP.
Yes. There's definitely quite a few of those battle cards out there. And if there's something you're specifically looking for, you can always reach out to me. My name's JR Page. My email address is jr.page@hp.com. Always feel free if there's something that you're not seeing. And I, as part of my job, I have a lot of back and forth with our marketing teams is making sure what we need out there. So if there's something that you're not seeing that we need, let me know, and I can, make sure that funnel that up to some of the higher ups for sure.
Awesome. This last question is just straight up fighting words, I think. Eric Chan asked, are Intel chips better than AMD chips? I kind of want to answer that because I bleed blue. Intel's better. There's no question about it. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, if you want to touch, JR, if you want to touch on that a little bit, I'll let that one go.
That's a great question. That's a great question. So, I will take the politically correct way of answering that. I have a lot of things I want to say in my head. And, as an HP badged employee, I got to make sure I answer this correctly, though. There is a place, I think, for AMD, for sure. I think they both make great processors. And I think the great thing about both companies is that they push each other. I think we're better off as an IT community to have both companies doing what they're doing and kind of striving to outdo each other. Because, we want that competition. It drives things. But Intel is better. And especially if you're on the business side of things, they're the better processor. Don't mind that they pay my paycheck, so don't worry about that part of it. But that goes without saying. Someone's trying to get me in trouble here. We may have to edit this part out at the end. So
a lot of shocked faces coming in on that one. I'm not even the least bit surprised to see that. But hey, if you think ecosystem, I mean, Intel's been baked into this for a really long time. So if you value the experience, that's definitely an area where I always push Intel. Just it's what it is, and yeah.
There was one question I did see earlier that came around the TOPS. I wanted to make sure I addressed the TOPS issue. So TOPS, for those of you who know, is trillions of operations per second. That's kind of become the new metric in the AI world. And so I think it's important that we see kind of where that is and where we stand with that. We are releasing a new product, the Lunar Lake product. It's going to be released later on this year. And that's going to, you'll see an increase in TOPS there. Right now, we're all running around that 15 to 20 TOPS rate. That's kind of the average from an application standpoint that we're seeing in the industry. And that's kind of a general overview of where they're at. There are some that are higher. There are some that are obviously they're lower. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do, is making sure that we keep up with that. So with the introduction of our new product lines, you're going to see, those TOPS numbers that are even higher than that. So like I said, I've seen some of those numbers. I'm not at liberty to talk about those quite yet. But we're going to continue to see that. I think this is very similar. The TOPS number that we look at is kind of very similar to cores. If you remember, when we bust out cores a couple of years ago from a processing standpoint, everybody was kind of, rushing to see who could get the most cores out. And I think what we found with that is it's very careful how you look at that, and I say the same things about TOPS because, if you have the highest TOPS, it doesn't mean you necessarily have the best processes. Same thing how it was with cores. It wasn't necessarily the most cores and actually always equal out to the most, the faster machines. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. And we probably don't have enough time to go into that type of stuff. But really, when you think of them an Intel standpoint, and Mitch, I think you said it perfectly when you said, compare them with our competition, it's the total package. When you look at Intel, it's the fact that, we're going to give you great performance, but you're not going to have to give up anything else. You're not going to have to give up security. You're not going to have to give up manageability because we've built those pieces into it as well. And so I think that's very important to take into account and to know there are competitors out there and they try to, silo one of those, one of those things out there, one of those little benchmarks out and say, oh, we're better at this than you guys are, because they want to take us out of that silo of the complete solution. Because I think everybody realizes, that's where Intel's strength is in the overall total solution.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And, I think everyone will start seeing that as a highlight on the newer platforms. It's going to be, platform TOPS versus NPU TOPS. So you'll, with Lunar Lake, for example, you'll have, a little over 40 TOPS, but you'll have Arc integrated graphics doing about 60. So right there you have over 100. And the way these AI features are being baked into applications, it's being developed so that they are able to use what's most efficient for how you're using the system, if that makes sense. So it'll know, okay, this can be done by the CPU, this can be done by the NPU, this can be done by the GPU. And that's how it ends up giving you that best experience across the whole platform. We got another question here on vPro. Do you know if GAN has been introduced into the new vPro chips?
It's a great question. I don't. I'll have to get back to you and do some research on that. I don't know if it's in this iteration of the product or not.
Cool.
By the way, I think I should, in this year of a political things that we got going on, I think I answered that AMD Intel question pretty well. What do you think? Should I say run for office?
Absolutely. That was good. That's a tough one. It's a hard question, especially from you and I. Don't have anything else rolling. Yeah, any last minute questions, feel free to send them through. Sam Michael, is there going to be Linux support for vPro? He's getting real technical on us.
Yeah, that's a complicated answer.
Sure.
And we may need to take that one offline on that to get some specifics around that. But that there's a lot that goes into that answer. So
yeah. Intel and Linux get along very well, so there's probably a way. That's
There,
that's about the best
and there,
answer I
there
can give
is.
for
I
that.
mean, again, and that's why it gets a little. I don't want to, I don't want to just give a yes or no answer on that because it kind of depends a little bit. So I think that there's, there's we have to look into that one a little bit more for you.
No problem. Scott says you have too much common sense to run for office. That was well put.
I'm gonna take that out and show my wife that. She may disagree with that comment, but
Yep, print that one out, frame that on the wall. Absolutely.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it.
Dean is asking, how about availability? Now, I don't know if that's regarding the current version of what we have available, or is he leaning towards Lunar Lakes? I know we discussed that a little bit, and I think that's slated for Q3 24.
Yeah. The availability right now, and you probably have better access into this, Mitch, than I do. The availability from that I can see is we really have availability across the board. And really, our G10s, as you know, are kind of we're weaning off those a little bit. So if you are using those, I think those are get what you have because there's not much of those left in the channel. But from a G11 standpoint, from my point of view, and I have a holistic view to it all. Is that the inventory is really good on the G11 stuff.
Yeah, that's so he did say for the AI processors. So those are available now. I think there may have been a little bit of marketing confusion on what Microsoft was kind of addressing with Copilot Plus PCs. AI PCs have already been a thing for several months now. They're readily available. The ultra-core processors have been baked into multiple vendors, plenty of HP systems available for this. So if you have additional questions on that, let us know. It's the advanced NPU features, I think, that you might be looking forward to, or maybe what will eventually qualify Intel AI PCs as Copilot Plus PCs, perhaps. If I'm on the right track there, just let me know. Happy to address that however needed. Yeah, readily available now. Please reach out to your team's questions.
I do want to throw it out there to you guys. If you do, I know you guys, D&H does a phenomenal job taking care of you guys, and I know their reps are one of the top teams that we work with. So if you have questions and you'd want to see some further discussions about any of this product in a little bit more detail, reach out to your D&H rep. They can get a hold of me or someone else from Intel. We can make sure that we get that taken care of and that we get that answered for you in a little bit more detail if you need that. So.
We've got questions rolling in here. When are IR webcams likely to become standard on HP Elite ones?
That's another really good question. When you say standard, I don't know if it's going to be a while. I think I think you'll probably see them maybe in the G12 stuff where you even become standard on it, maybe a little later. I know that's something that gets talked about quite a bit though.
They're just pouring in here. All right, let me get Paul's question here. Can you add a TPM chip to existing computers to make them compliant with Windows 11? Might be a little bit outside of the scope of this presentation, but
yeah, that I'm not sure about.
I want to lean towards no because that's typically embedded.
That would be my first thought, but
yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on that one either.
Yeah, I don't want to say that you can't by guessing, but from experience, I'm leaning towards no. We could find out for sure, absolutely, or if that's something that might become standard in the near future. We can definitely take something like that offline and help you out. All right, as a tier 2 reseller, are there marketing resources available for my public sector customers, and what would the value prop be?
Yes, we definitely have public sector available marketing material for sure. I think that's probably one of those things that we need to take as a one-off and maybe kind of reach out to one of us, D&H or myself, and we can point you in the right direction to make sure you have access to those.
Perfect. Jan questioned overclocking. That's a slippery slope at the moment, unfortunately. Some rumors in your overclocking is traditionally never a thing on mobile, but Arrow Lake for desktop, when that launches, I believe will be a thing. I don't have any details on that. I've actually have heard some rumors about clock speeds potentially coming down just to address some potential stability issues, but that's all rumor. That's nothing I would put in writing. So great question. If you want to circle back and let us know if you're asking about that on laptops or desktops, we can address that further.
I used to work for a white box reseller, so I can talk to you all about the overclocking from that standpoint. I don't know how much Intel or AMD or any of those guys want us talking about that, but it's definitely out there. So
it's an interesting thing. It's definitely more prominent in the competitive scene. For general users, I mean, these CPUs have become so efficient over the years that they're overclocking at the max frequency on their own. Sure, you could push that a little bit further, but then you're really weighing gains versus stability. So,
and to that point, especially from a business standpoint, I would never even look at that.
Yeah. Great questions, though. And for everyone else still here, for everyone else still here, this is going to be recorded, and we will be posted on dndh.com, and it will be up on our YouTube channel. So check that out. Also regarding vPro, we're going to have some content coming out. I will be interviewing a representative of Intel. Specifically, it's going to be a technical deep dive on vPro. There seems to be a lot of love for that, so keep an eye out for that. But for your HP resources, check out dndh.com/HP. We're going to have asset material from today's presentation up there, so check it out. And if you have questions, reach out to HP specialist at dndh.com. If you need help, more maybe technical information, stuff like that, feel free to reach out to our technical solutions team at technicalsolutions@dndh.com. JR shared his information. I would assume feel free to reach out to him directly. I'll let you confirm that. But yeah, other than that, JR, if you have any closing statements, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it. Great information. Really looking forward to working with you further. So take it away.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And for all you guys that stayed around this long, thank you for the questions. I think it really, training in a virtual environment is kind of tough, and you guys really stayed around and were engaged. And so thank you for that. So I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, JR.